Good evening, I'm Chris Wallace in for Brett Baer. The Obama administration is in full damage control mode tonight over suddenly exploding scrutiny of how it explained the Benghazi attack to the American people. The president's spokesman endured a relentless grilling from reporters about why the administration's talking points on Benghazi were changed a dozen times. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen is here with today's dramatic developments. Good evening, James.
Chris, good evening. Tonight, under a microscope as never before, the Obama administration's heretofore secret deliberations about how top officials should describe Benghazi to lawmakers and the American people when a presidential election was looming on the horizon. At the White House, reporters bombarded Press Secretary Jay Carney with questions about the interagency process that scrubbed the Benghazi talking points of multiple references they had originally contained to al-Qaeda, terrorism, and Islamic extremists, disclosures that called into question Carney's insistence on Wednesday that the White House had only made one small stylistic change.
The points went further in assigning responsibility than preliminary assessments suggested, and there was concern about preserving the integrity of the investigation. That concern was expressed in other quarters, not just at the State Department.
The May 20 issue of the Weekly Standard cites an email that then CIA Director General David Petraeus sent to CIA's Legislative Affairs Chief Chip Walter on Saturday, September 15, 4 days after the attacks, in which Petraeus is said to have expressed frustration at the Obama administration's systematic removal of all references to Islamic terrorists or al-Qaeda from the talking points CIA had prepared the day before.
I respect the people who spoke up in the course of these hearings. You know, they were there. They felt the horror of that terrorist attack, and obviously it's emotional. But I hate to see it turned into a pure, prolonged political process that really doesn't tell us anything new about the facts.
Separately, ABC News' Jonathan Karl reports having obtained 12 versions of the Benghazi talking points. According to that report, when an early CIA draft listed the many instances prior to 9/11 when the agency issued warnings about the deteriorating security situation in Benghazi, then State Department spokeswoman Victoria Nuland emailed her interagency colleagues to say the early CIA draft could be abused by members of Congress to beat up the State Department for not paying attention to warnings. So why would we want to feed that either? Concerned. When the revised document still included references to the culpability of the al-Qaeda-linked group Ansar al-Sharia, Nuland reportedly sent another email, this time warning, we don't want to prejudice the FBI investigation. At that point, ABC said, an as yet unidentified National Security Council official pushed back, telling Nuland the FBI did not have major concerns with the points and offered only a couple minor suggestions. Nuland is said to have insisted the changes were not sufficient to address the concerns of, quote, my building's leadership. A State Department spokesman declined to say who Nuland had in mind. The White House also appeared to reject calls by House Speaker John Boehner to release to the public unclassified emails that lawmakers read from at Wednesday's explosive House oversight hearing on Benghazi. Jay Carney saying that those documents and much more, Chris, have already been made available to the relevant lawmakers and to Speaker Boehner.
James, sit tight just for a moment. Today's White House briefing stirred memories of Watergate and Iran-Contra when presidential spokesmen came under similar fire. We want to play some of the back and forth between Jay Carney and the press corps at length.
John.
Jay, you told us that the only changes that were made were stylistic. Is it a stylistic change to take out all references to previous terror threats in Benghazi?
Well, I appreciate the question again, and I think that what I was referring to was the talking points that the CIA drafted and sent around. To which one change was made. And I accept that stylistic may not precisely describe a change of one word to another.
Jay, this was not a change of one word to another.
No, I'm just...
These underwent extensive changes after they were written by the CIA. Sure. These were concerns that were raised by the State Department that the White House directed the interagency process to use in making these talking points.
Well, I think
the CIA original version included references to al-Qaeda, references to Ansar al-Islam. The original CIA version included extensive discussion of the previous threats of terrorist attacks in Benghazi. Those were taken out after the CIA wrote its initial draft.
And then the CIA wrote another draft.
Based on input from the State Department.
Well, but here's what I've been saying,
Do you
John.
deny that?
No, John, what I'm saying is and I've answered this question several times now, but I'm happy to answer it again if you let me answer it, and that is that there was an interagency process, which is always the case, because a lot of agencies have a stake in a matter like this. The investigative agency, the CIA, the intelligence agencies, the State Department in this case, the national security staff. And everybody provided information and comment. And then on Saturday morning, the CIA said, we're going to take a crack at drafting these points based on what we know.
Do you acknowledge that your initial characterization of the White House's involvement was to some extent a mischaracterization of the extent to which the White House was involved in the evolution of those talks?
Kristen, I think it's really important to examine now the information, again, that we provided Congress months ago, which they have chosen for political reasons to leak today, which is their prerogative, I suppose. But the fact is, the White House's involvement to the talking points that were generated by the CIA that Saturday was to make the single change, suggest the single change.
But why not come forward initially and say Friday night White House officials were involved in the interagency process that you've described? Why not offer that information at the start?
There was no intent here to do anything but answer the question, which the questions were related to, this was the Republican accusation that everybody was very excited about at the time, did the White House change the intelligence community's assessment of what happened? Did the White House tell the intelligence community to say that there were demonstrations? And the underreported fact of all the revelations today is that these documents bear out what we said all along. The answer is no. The answer is no.
Let's not put this out because we're not sure it's true. The phrase is, let's not put this out because we don't want to be criticized by our political opponents. Is that not political in itself?
Well, again, I think the State Department has addressed the spokesperson's office's concerns about this, but they focused on not assigning responsibility prematurely before based on preliminary assessments that by experience and definition were likely to change, and that we not use language that was inconsistent with what administration, that members of Congress not be deploying information about this that, again, wasn't based on what we knew or believed to be true, or that other administration officials had been using.
On the backgrounder you had earlier, you said, well, everybody does it, basically. Republicans and Democrats, everybody has backgrounders. You all came to town, though, saying you were going to be different, change the rule, be more transparent. Don't you think it encourages the idea that you had something, or your colleagues or whoever did the backgrounder, I wasn't there, has something to say they didn't want to say out here?
Not at all. There's nothing that, that was an effort to, as we do periodically, to walk people through, what we knew with granularity, which I'm happy to do for as long as you want here.
James, I sat in that White House briefing room for 6 years in the Reagan administration during Iran-Contra. As part of it, White House reporters don't like it if they feel they were misled by the person standing behind that podium. And what you saw today was a bunch of White House reporters, mainstream as well as Fox, who felt they'd been misled.
Well, and it's no secret, Chris, that the Obama administration for a long time now has had a basic problem on Benghazi in terms of what it knew and when about the attacks and what it said and when about the attacks. The most recent of these problems is Jay Carney's insistence on Wednesday that the White House only made one stylistic change to these talking points late in the game. But the documents arrayed by the Weekly Standard and ABC News and published over the past week show that the Deputy National Security Advisor at the White House, Ben Rhodes, was an early participant in this process on Friday, September 15, and that he lined up with Victoria Nuland, the State Department spokeswoman, in a way that served to accelerate the scrubbing of the talking points, not slow it down.